Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, hello, whatever time it is where you are joining us out there, and welcome back to yet another episode of Game for Thought. My name is Allie Weiss. I am our ethics coordinator in international game development here at Hoest Digital Arts and Entertainment, located in Kortrijk, Belgium, and I am absolutely thrilled to bring to you all out there our very last episode, our season 3 finale of Game for Thought. Time has absolutely flown by. During the span of the past few months, we've had guests from 9 different countries across 3 different continents, and we've covered topics that are extremely relevant in the industry today, such as mobile games, sustainability, ethics and AI, and so on. And tonight, I'm really excited to bring to you another live stream, this time about identity and representation in digital entertainment. I want to give you all an overview of the origins of the Game for Thought story and how we started off with this live stream. So we started in 2020, and we built this live stream studio that you see here at Hoest, DIE, as we like to call it. And we started going live here on Twitch every month, tackling a different ethically relevant topic in the games and film and digital entertainment industry. And it was meant to just open up a space for staff and students and industry professionals and really anyone on Twitch to be able to make their voices heard and to engage in meaningful and really constructive discussions and conversations about these topics. So in a nutshell, that is Game for Thought every third Wednesday. We are right here joining on Twitch. And again, thrilled to have you back. During the live stream, you are welcome to ask any question that you have. You can ask it in the chat. Just make sure to put a capital Q beforehand so we know that what you're saying is a question, and we'll be happy to ask it to our panel members a bit later on. So to give you an overview of the live stream tonight, so in just a bit, we're going to do things a little bit differently this time around to maximize our conversation. We're going to jump right into the panel discussion. So we'll have around an hour of our panel discussion where we will be tackling some pre-submitted questions that we got out there from the audience, and then we'll leave some time at the end for an audience Q&A as well. So don't forget to ask any questions that might come up in the chat. Joining us on the panel tonight, I'm super excited to announce our wonderful lineup of guests. We have Rila Khalid joining us from Montreal, Canada. Rila is the director of the Technoculture, Art, and Games Research Center at Concordia University. We also have Caden Hertz, and Caden is a game designer. He was also the founder of the queer community at Lucas School of Arts in Belgium. We have Aisha Brown, who will be joining us just a little bit later on. And Aisha is joining us from the United States. She is a producer at Xbox and also a board member of Women in Games, Women in Tech Hollywood. And additionally, we have Madiba Olivier joining us from Cameroon. So again, we have guests from 3 different continents on this live stream tonight. Always very international. Madiba is the founder and CEO of Kiru Games in Cameroon. And I'm super happy to welcome one of our very own Hoest DIE students, Nili Allard. Nili is in her final year, just about to complete her studies here with us at DIE in 3D animation. So we will jump into the panel discussion in just a second. Again, throughout the stream, you are welcome to engage in discussion, engage in conversation within the chat. Just make sure to keep it mature, respectful, and also nuanced as well. And ask any questions you might have. Alrighty, I'm ready. Let's jump into it. Season 3 finale. Let's go. Alrighty, and we are here, joined with our lovely panel members for this evening, Nili, Kaden, Madiba, and Rila. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And as I mentioned earlier, Ayasia will be joining us in just a little bit. Before we jump into the questions this evening, I'd love to let's all get familiarized with each other. So I would love for you all to introduce yourselves, what your background is, where you are joining us from, and also why you were interested in joining this live stream. And I'll start with whoever I see first. Nili. Nili, I'm sorry, I see you first. Go right ahead.
No worries. So hi, my name is Nelly. I am a last year student at Digital DA in the major 3D production and VFX that no longer exists, and I specialize as a lighting artist. I'm joining you from my house in Brussels, by the way. The reason I was interested in this topic is because I am femme presenting, I am bisexual, I'm genderqueer, and I thought it would be interesting to compare my experience at DAE as a student with my recent first-time experience of the professional industry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nili, for joining us. And it's been quite some time since we've had a student on the panel as well. So I am really thrilled to have you here, and also interested to hear about your experience both as a student and also now while you're in your internship and on the cusp of your career as well. How that's been going for you. Awesome. Thanks, Nili. Kaden, hello.
Hi everybody, I'm Kaden. I studied game design at the Lucas School of Art in Genk. That's in Limburg. I got a bachelor and a master degree for that. And after that, I decided that studying wasn't over for me yet, so I also studied a master in gender and diversity at UGent. I recently graduated, so at the moment I'm still looking for a job. During my studies, I mainly focused on transgender identity and transgender representation in video games, so I hope that's something interesting that I can bring to the table tonight. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Super happy to have you here. Thank you, Kaden. Rila, I see you next. Go right ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Rila Khalid. I'm a professor at Concordia University. I am a professor of computation arts. I'm also the director of the Technoculture Art and Games Research Center at Concordia. What drew me to this panel? Well, my PhD research was on culture and technology, and that it goes back a few years now, but there's something about being a visible minority, which means that these issues never really go away. And I think that that's going to be a recurring theme for all of the panelists here. We're interested, but also these questions come and find us in the form of other people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rila. And Rila was also she was going to join us back in October when actually this topic was supposed to be discussed, and it was rescheduled till today. And thankfully, Rila was able to join us again. So it's really lovely to see you again. Thanks for coming. Madiba, hello. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself as well. We'd love to hear.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Madiba Olivier, the founder of Kiro Games. We are the first video game studio in Cameroon, in the Central Africa region. And we have designed the first African fantasy RPG game of the gaming history ever. And it's a project that I've carried from 23 to today. So it's like 20 years of dreaming against, you can imagine all the you can never make it, etc. So it went from student project in my university to this Orion Verse cross-media dream that we have today. And I am there in the panel to share a little bit of experience as African game designer, pioneers in emerging African fantasy, all the good and the challenging part of that, and also learn from them on their way of as a minority in the industry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Madiba. Really thrilled to have you all on board here this evening. And as I said just a couple minutes ago, so I have a list of pre-submitted questions that were submitted from students, also from those of you out there on Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere on the internets. And I'm going to start with the very first question because I think what's a better way to start than from number one? So this question reads, how have diversity and representation shaped digital entertainment, particularly comparing the current state of the industry and the content produced over the course of the past 10 or so years? So during the course of your education or in your career, how have you seen diversity and representation shaping digital entertainment? Has there been a change and kind of a look on the state of the industry today?
Ladies first.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll go ahead and okay. As the person who's clearly the oldest here, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. I think things have definitely improved over the last 10 years. Things have definitely improved, but there's still a long way to go. And I think that we also have to be aware that industry is not a monolith. Okay, there's many different sectors of industry. There's indie studios, there's AAA studios, and there are differences there in terms of what people are willing to do, where people are willing to invest as well. So I would say that just very broad brushstrokes, it's the smaller studios that are willing to take risks and tell stories and share realities that come from communities and groups who we might call equity seeking, right? We're seeing a lot of that happening within smaller studios. We see it less within very large studios, but it's definitely better. But I still think we have a long way to go, and I guess that's partly why we're having this conversation today.
Precisely. That is precisely why we come together. Thanks so much, Rila. But Diba, you wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, the last 10 years, yeah, I try to go on the positive vibes about it because I see a lot of ones on the way. No, I think things are better. Things are better for the diversity. We see more and more studio trying to do diverse heroes. We have but we still have a long way to walk, and especially, for example, in the gaming African scene, we have finally the conclusion that it will be very hard to see an African studio with African founders get funded, especially in no top class countries out of Nigeria, etc. Because there is this huge, like Raya says, it's not a monolith, so it's not. We have to know that there's a diversity there, but we still have a wall to be connected to the right people. I will mostly say that, like, you see, when I have this phrase that I said at the convention last year. In Africa, we need visionary investors, for example, visionary partners, the people who like to invest their time, their money for the future. And what we get is the less visionary people that they send on funding in Africa, because the best, they keep them on Silicon Valley only. And they send the guy with no energy, no thing. He's asking you question of countries where everything is already done when you are trying to build everything from scratch. So there is this impossible talk that we have to match as diverse. And I think it's not only an African thing. Every minority has this problem. Even when you go see, for example, Black developers in US, it's almost often the same thing. So we have to make, because we lose something in terms of creativity, we lose something in terms of new games, new stories that our industry is losing, in fact.
Right.
So yeah, that's my point on it. We have done some good part, but there is so much to do that we still have to keep double work.
Right, exactly. Thank you so much, Madiba. And it's also it's really interesting what you say in terms of the stories, investing in these diverse stories. It also makes it makes the content more interesting and also accessible for more people, a wider range of individuals. We'll touch back on that in just a little bit. Caden or Nili, so both of you have either recently graduated from your university or are just about finished. Nili, I'm looking at you. Given your experience in education, how have you seen these topics change over time? How have you experienced this?
Well, I'm still really young. So 10 years ago, I was 12. I was just starting high school. So it's kind of tough to really see an evolution because I feel like I had a less broad view on those topics when I was that young. And I started getting more involved with it as I became a teenager. And then I started going to college, obviously. And now that I'm getting into the industry, I feel like the main thing for me is I'm joining Madiba on this topic. It's like having people tell their own story would be like a nice step forward, for instance.
All right, thanks so much, Nili. And hey, even your insights as a as a previous 12-year-old, they still matter. They still count. Thanks so much. Caden, anything to add as well?
Yeah, definitely. Like Nelly said, I was very young back 10 years ago, but during my research in both studies, I can see that there is quite some improvement when it comes to queer representation. When I look at the content, back in the days, there were basically no trans characters at all in any games, and if they were usually like the joke, or they were the victim of some kind of violent action. And now you see a few AAA game companies actually pay more attention to us. I quickly think of Naughty Dog and their The Last of Us 2, where there were quite a few queer characters. There was even a trans character who had quite a lot of screen time, and I feel that they did represent him very well. He was also voiced by a trans actor, which is also not often done at game studios or even in film productions where trans characters are played by actual trans people. So that's definitely an improvement.
And I think that also piggybacks off of what Nili said as well about people who have these experiences telling their own stories and creating content that way.
Indeed.
All
exactly.
right. Yep. Thanks so much. Anything to add before we move on to the next question, which I think is also a question that everyone in the audience might have as well. It was one of the first ones that was submitted. So our previous live stream last month was about inclusive recruitment. So we were looking at, of course, both of these topics have to do with identity, representation, inclusivity. The previous stream was more so focused on, okay, what is our recruitment, what are our policies? Who are we specifically targeting? What is our intentionality there? This stream will focus more so on, okay, what does the workplace look like after people are actually recruited? What are the practices like then? And also on the flip side, what does the content look like that is actually produced? And so this question has to do a bit more so regarding the content. And we've already been talking about people telling their own story. So I think that perfectly segues into this question. So it reads, it's great to have a diverse range of characters in your games, but how do you make sure that, for example, a character of color is authentically created as to accurately and respectfully depict that individual? How does or should that concept turn into creation? And how does that look like?
Oh, Madiba,
I
do you want
can
to go
jump
ahead?
in this time.
You can play rock, paper, scissors, shoot to see who goes first.
Okay, so I can jump in this time. It's okay, Rila, I can? Can I? Okay,
Go right
good.
ahead, Madiba.
Okay, so yeah, it's a really, really interesting question. In the studio, of course, we are mainly Cameroonian, so but you will be surprised that we had struggled at the beginning to find our own authenticity because we had no reference. So it was a challenge to even make design African stories and African clothes to my artists because for 20 years of their life they were used to design Japanese heroes and they never think about drawing the hair, etc. So we had to create our own way to draw ourselves somehow. And also one of the challenge that we had was the fact that, okay, we have to write African stories, but to give them this universal appeal to not go into the exotic case. Like, okay, it's something it's so exotic. No, we had to put something on, about our perspective of the global text of the world. And this was a lot about our universe. But now something what I want a little bit to talk is the diversity we have to include in the studio for women to be able to work here. We are still working a lot on that. We don't have a lot of girl in the studio, woman girl. There are only two for today. And I think the maximum we had was 3 or 4. And in a huge team of 20, 25 people, there have always be a minority of girls. And we try to recruit girls really. I really enjoyed that for the first time. I have a woman coder in the team. And why is it so hard? Because the geek attitude is still really new for girls in the country first, so they are not really into it. You start to see it more now on the generation of the 12 years. So in 10 years it will be more easy to get girls in code, in gaming, etc. I'm sure that is already better now than 10 years ago, that you have more girls coming at the recruitment. And but now where it's out is the, I don't know what to call it, in the day hours of work. The fact that you have too much extensive hours, people have to work very late because
Mm-hmm.
we crunch a lot. It's a sad thing. We try to diminish how we can, but since we don't have the training in the country, we have to compensate a lot. So people have to work at least 2 times or 3 times normal rate of work for the first year at Kiro Games, so they catch up the late that they had to catch. And this is really hard on women because of security. They cannot work late on the studio. We try to make the cars drive them home, but socially it's also a huge pressure because even when they are really young, they can go for it. But when they start to want to build a family, it's really, really painful. And this is something that we try to think about how, when we will be more successful as a studio, we must, and even before, because that's something we are challenged about that by them every day, like don't wait to succeed. You have to find a way to use their word, not mine, but I'm trying to get it for myself too. Use our feminine energy without turning us into men. So you have to build this place so that we are not like you. We don't have to maybe stay there until 2 a.m., but use what we can provide and organize stuff around that. And it's challenging, but the good thing is when you manage to do that, you have insights of stuff that you would have never had if a woman was not in the room. Quick example, and I finish on it. the girl just behind me, the heroine of the story, for like 4 years, we had a way to design her eyes. Like we were boys drawing eyes. And when the girl came in the studio, she was in marketing. She was like, no woman on earth will let this eyes like this. So the way you brush we were totally no, we didn't think about this kind of detail, but they made us change the way we draw her eyes and the hair and her hair. Sorry. And this is the kind of detail that when we made this, we saw our female players, users realize it. Oh, I like how you draw it. So, okay. And also a lot in the psychology writing, like often when we design female enemies or heroines, we have to discuss with them about the challenge, how will they manifest it, and it's really, really enriching to get a diverse team. In fact, challenging, but the reward is better than the challenge.
Thank you so much. So much food for thought, I think, in what you just said. And I think also I hear that within regarding the characters that you just mentioned, there was discussion with the individuals whose stories would be told about those characters. And so at least, I mean, if somebody else was doing the art or the modeling of the character, there was still a discussion, for example, with a female artist about a female character. So the discussion piece, I think, is something to be noted. Rila, go right ahead.
Sure. You know what? I'm going to segue actually from what Madiba brought up about women and computer science, because really it's a problem that starts upstream, right? It's not that, you get to the workplace and you're like, okay, let's have equal representation of everyone now. If you don't have talent coming in who already look diverse, then, well, there's your problem right there. So I say this as someone who studied computer science. And, I remember being one woman, a woman in a class of basically 300 dudes. Okay, and it was like, that was intense. That was a lot to deal with. But it also sort of, for better or worse, socialized me in a particular way, which is probably why I still work where I do. But I want to pick up on some of the things that, Ali, that you mentioned, like authenticity. I want to point out that authenticity is a terribly, terribly loaded word. Okay, for people of whatever identity, you will never get to a core authenticity because it simply doesn't exist. Like, I know that it's nice to think, oh, if we work with people who come from a particular community, that's going to be a perfectly authentic representation. But that's not the case, because that would suggest that there's some kind of essentialist truth about how to portray a particular identity. Okay, and I know that that's unfortunately not it's not the easiest answer to hear because it complicates everyone's job. But I think that we can't say we've ever captured authenticity. We can say that we're sort of nearing the ballpark, but I think that we can definitely say that there's more ethical ways of working and there's less ethical ways of working, and the more ethical ways of working will involve getting people from the communities that you want to represent, getting them to push the major decision making. Okay, but what I've seen happening in studios, and I would love to hear what the rest of you think about this, is that often it's the case that, for instance, there's a studio very, very close to me, just down the street, and they're making a video game that features like a strong Indigenous Canadian storyline. And then I asked them, okay, oh, great, well, who do you have in your team who's feeding the story? And they said, well, we're working with an amazing 3D artist. And that's both nice to hear, but then also disappointing that they weren't able to find someone who is a game designer from that Indigenous community. And I think that that's the climate we currently live in. Like perhaps we know of someone from the community who's working in the games industry, but they're not necessarily in the in the absolutely aligned role, but they kind of need to end up serving so many roles. So that's something to keep in mind is, yes, it's great to involve people from the community, but then there's also complications that can arise from that. And for those of us who are already here working in the space, we are playing so many roles at the same time.
Right. Thank you so much. I really think what you say about the word authenticity. I've never heard that take before, but I think it speaks loudly, and it's a very important point. Ayesha, I see you've joined us. Hello there, Ayesha. Welcome to our stream. You're very welcome. Yes, before we continue, Ayesha, if you could just briefly introduce yourself as well to everyone watching out there on Twitch. Welcome.
Greetings. I'm Ayesha. I'm a senior producer at Xbox. Everything you just said resonated perfectly because I got thoughts. I also sit on the board of Women in Tech Hollywood and Creating Coding Careers in San Diego. Lifelong gamer, 16-year veteran, 4 years Air Force, 12 years Marine Corps. So really about that life. And I'm here to have a great conversation with some amazing people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ayesha. We're super happy to have you here as well. Just to reiterate, because I think you joined in the middle of an answer, but I'll repeat the question again. So the question we have, and this is one that was pre-submitted, is it's great to have a diverse range of characters in your games, but how do you make sure that, for example, a character of color is authentically created? And then we just talked a bit about the word authenticity, how... Rila said it's a loaded term, actually, and you can't authentically create one human being. How does that concept to creation process look like? So, in essence, wanting diverse characters versus writing diverse characters. Ayesha, Nili, Kaden, if you want to add anything to that, go right ahead.
I guess I can jump in. I'm going to push back Princess when it comes to who is creating the characters, because I've seen characters created from a stereotypical lens. Actually, I think about 2 weeks ago, I was like, who drew these? Because these looks like characters from the Steamboat Willie era, and they look like caricatures. And I was like, there's no way you can tell me that you could not find an artist in this space that could have done this, because I can tell you now, who did this without even knowing who the artist was. I can tell you what kind of artist it was. I think authenticity comes from two places. One, being aligned to it, being an ally of, or just having a passion for. People cannot create people. People cannot create people without an unbiased lens, no matter what, because it does not matter who it is. If I ask anyone to describe someone of a race other than theirs or ethnicity other than theirs, it will come with a built-in bias, because even those are your descriptors. Who taught you them? How are you using them? Do these people, resonate with those descriptors? They probably don't, but it's what you know, and it's your normal, and it may not be their reality. I think it is very easy. Correction. I think it is accessible in 2023 to be able to find creators from across the spectrum. Some people just don't want to do the work, or they don't want to pay. When it comes to Indigenous, there are some amazing, beautiful Indigenous artists out there. I can go on Instagram right now and put in Indigenous artists, and a slew of them will pop up. Did I do my due diligence to reach out? Why am I not going to pay them what they're worth? If I'm going to pay this well-known creator who is not of that authentic background to create this, why wouldn't I match that same person's salary? Oh, because it's a lesser known artist? Like, I think there's some disparities and there's some bias that goes into it. Pushback princess, I won't stand for it.
I love that. So you think, I think the convenience piece is also very important, that, people reach out to the people that are in their own circles already. And it is an extra step to transcend that circle, but that is a step. And I think we also touched about it in the last stream. That's a step that is necessary in order to have change, because change cannot happen unless you change how you are finding the people that are creating for you. Thanks so much, Aisha. Kaden, Nili, anything to add to that? Within your own experiences, projects that you've worked on or seen? If not, that is okay. We can also skip along to the next question as well. Yes, Madiba. Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, just to add something by fusing what Rila and Aisha says, there is a management of paradox that's happened when you start to manage humans. I think that's, and I see when I hear them talk, sorry, I usually speak French, so I have to often find my words. I can see how they have managed a lot of paradox in their path, because I can see the world, the wisdom, the experience. I can even feel the doubt and all the challenge, and maybe the loss that you have, the failure that you have done to have this mastery when you talk about it. But what I want to say is, the paradox of the networking is the fact that I was very angry about this bubble system where only those who know someone finally. And after that, I started to understand that there is this paradox where we have people have to go out of their comfort zone to find something new. But at the same time, this comfort zone has been built to bring safety and trust. That is often, to be honest, also, it's not because people are diverse that they are good people. We also often have this Aladdin bias, like, oh, if they are, the thing is in a Brazilian love comedy where if people are poor, they have great hurt. And we know in life it's not so true. It's not because you are poor that you have a big hurt in humanity, and it's not because you are rich that you are someone that is only superficial. These are two caricatures. They have good and bad in every side, and I think this is one of the engine of why people want to stay in their comfort zone. And something that I try to learn to me and my team is what I call the group dynamic, about helping the other one to break his own zone, really by understanding where the fear of getting out come from. Because at the end of the day, they will resist if you just want to push them. We tried, and now I'm trying to be more tai chi about it than huge karate.
Aisha, yes. And then after Aisha, we'll go right over to Kaden. Go right ahead.
I don't care about anybody's comfort zone. When it comes to, I don't care about anybody's comfort zone, because you don't grow there. I think it's a responsibility for everyone that's in the room, right? Very often I show up the only woman in the room. I show up the only Black person in the room. I show up the only Black woman in the room. I show up the only queer woman in the room. Like, I show up in all these different facets. It is my responsibility, because I'm in that room, to be like, hey, speaking of Indigenous artists, I'm like, hey, has anyone reached out to Dylan Moore? That's a phenomenal Indigenous artist. Like, if you're in the room, you're already in the tree of trust. Bring somebody else in. If you're in there and you're not saying anything, you're gatekeeping just as well, and you're a part of the problem. And if you don't feel empowered, do some self-work and be like, all right, well, what can I do? Who can I get on board? Who is influencing everyone? And how can I have that person help me bring someone else in? But I think it's very important that if we are sitting in these rooms sitting at these tables, if we are not using our voices, we're doing the entire industry a disservice.
Yes. The only thing I have to say to that is yes. I see somebody in the chat also says hell yeah.
I am becoming a huge fan already. I'm like calling girls in the studio to come and watch you talk. Like, okay, okay.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, Aisha just comes in here. She joins. She says stuff. We get goosebumps. Awesome. All right. Caden, go right ahead. And then Nili, of course, if you have anything to add, go ahead.
Sure. I agree, and I think we really have to leave that comfort zone if we really want to grow and learn. And I think people who kind of belong to the majority really have to sit with a certain uncomfortability to grow and learn. And it's okay to acknowledge that you don't know everything, that you are biased in the way you are thinking about people, about identities. And only if you acknowledge that, I think it's the only way to move forward, to learn more and to be like open-minded when you learn about people who may not share the same identity as you are.
Right. Definitely. I think that's a like super important first point also to like acknowledge the bias that we have. It's just a human, it is a psychological fact that we all have these biases if we are not part of that in group. So yep, definitely Caden. Thanks for sharing. All right. We will move on to another question. Actually, this is I think a fundamental question. Maybe I should have posed this a bit earlier, but hey, it's a great time also to ask it now. Why? So we're talking about already making characters that do their stories justice. We've already talked about how diversity and representation have shaped digital entertainment within the past 10 years or so. I want to now ask why. There is a huge, like in capital letters, why? Why are we talking about this? Why should people out there on Twitch or on YouTube, why should they be interested? Why should students at our university also, why should they take these topics into consideration? And not just hear it around them. Why should they really engage with these topics? Really, in essence, just a big capital question mark, why? But the question actually reads, why have this conversation in the first place? What is the importance of representation at its essence?
I'll jump in for once. I feel like it's especially important for future generations because for me, as example, as a white person, I never had trouble seeing myself represented in media. A lot of movies feature white people, most of them do in Hollywood. But seeing like queer characters, seeing bisexual characters, seeing female characters represented as different characters than just like the stereotypical archetypes makes you like you internalize that, hey, I can do this too, maybe. Like a colleague of mine, for instance, gave me an example of an experiment that was done in a school where they first let very young children do an exercise, and they said it was a drawing exercise. And for some reason, the girls in the class scored better on average. And then they did the exact same exercise, but said it was a geometry exercise. And suddenly the boys scored way better. So it's something we internalize from a very young age. The stereotypes that we associate with our gender, with our race, with our sexuality. And it's something that can very quickly limit us, whilst it shouldn't.
Thanks so much, Nili. Rila, if you want to add on to that, and then I'll jump over. I think Aisha wanted to add something as well.
Sure. I mean, well, representation is everything. I didn't grow up seeing myself in any form of media. My family comes from Bangladesh, but I grew up in New Zealand. And Yeah, so I just grew up surrounded by white media, and I felt like I essentially did not exist anywhere. And I know that this is a pretty common experience for a lot of people who are visible minorities. We don't see ourselves. Okay, so that I mean, there's so many reasons why we need to be thinking and talking about these things. That would be one. Okay, like for the global majority, we deserve to exist in these media that we consume. Okay, like if we're talking about this from a sort of marketing financial perspective, oh my God, it would be so profitable if people from everywhere in the world felt like they could see themselves and got super excited about the media that told their stories, that was about their perspectives. You know, media that feels like home. Okay, because like for so many of us, games that we play, movies that we watch, I mean, there's a familiarity, but it doesn't go all the way. And like, if you are a young person growing up and you don't see yourself around, then a lot of the time you're left thinking, well, I am a little bit less than, or I'm not really meant to be here. So, you know, if I think about my younger self, I want to try and fix that. You know, I'm thinking about my kid as well. I don't want him to walk around this world feeling like he's in the wrong place. No, he's absolutely in the right place. The problem is that the media needs to reflect all of us. So there's that aspect of like who gets to see themselves represented and who deserves to be represented. But from another perspective, it is for the health of our craft. It's for the health of the medium. If we want games to stay interesting, then we have to keep changing what we do with them. We can't afford to keep replicating. And that's what we've been seeing for so long, is just more of the same. Oh, we'll slide in, you know, there's going to be a person of color in a minor role. Oh, there we go. We managed to get that character in. Yay. It's like, yeah, but how much have you actually deviated from, you know, the core formula? So from an experimentation perspective, from being able to keep the medium evolving, we need to do this. This is how we get new stories. This is how we get new mechanics. This is how our medium becomes better than what it is, by bringing in new people with new ideas who have the right to tell particular stories.
Thanks so much. I'm also glad that you bring in the marketing, the business aspect of it as well, because, for example, for a story or for a game to be diverse or have representation involved, it does not, that and financial success do not have to be, they are not mutually exclusive. So it is beneficial in that way. And I think it's interesting that you touch on that. Aisha, go right ahead. Oh, Aisha? I think perhaps
Okay.
there is.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah, I was like, what? My phone rang and it just killed all the sound everywhere. All right. So someone asked, why does it matter? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I won't assume who the person is. I won't assume their background. I won't assume their gender. What I will assume is that maybe they don't realize the influence that representation has given to them thus far. I say that take any male, it doesn't matter, race, creed, color. Take any male. Somewhere along the lines, you saw in a movie that men can stand up outside and pee on a tree. At some point in your life, you've stood up and you peed on a tree, or you've peed outside, or off the side of the car, or somewhere convenient, because you saw that someone else did it and it could be done because you were equipped to do that, right? Is that a fair trade for the gentleman on the call? Have you peed outside somewhere at some point in your life? It's represented for you all. For women, When we look at the TV and they show that activity for us, it's always an obstacle, right? It's always like it's a production or a full-on production. But we knew it was possible. You just had to take some precautions, some extra measures. Same thing with everything else. If you are one of one in a space and you don't see anyone like you doing something different, but you see someone not like you doing all the great things, you don't think that you're capable of great things. I wasn't the first woman veteran. It was women who came before me who served, who let me know that I could join. I'd be like, oh, I could do that. I could totally be a pilot. I totally shoot. I could totally do all these things because I saw that representation somewhere else. I think Nilly was correct. Like, even in Hollywood, white actors play black roles. You mean to tell me of all these millions of people in the world, you couldn't find a black actress to play a black role? But the world will go crazy if a black actress plays a fictional fish, mermaid per se. So that's why it's important, because people have to be able to see themselves doing something. Men didn't know they could be cheerleaders until they saw male cheerleaders. Men didn't know they could be dancers till they saw male dancers. Women didn't know that they could be in politics till they started to see women politicians. Women didn't know they could take off their hijab until they started seeing other women leading the way, taking off their hijabs. They're just, you have to know that it's possible in order to make it a reality for yourself. And when it comes to, specifically when it comes to gaming, if the only thing we are seeing is the negative stereotype, then that is what we are forced to believe that you are. I want to see a black hero instead of a black villain for once. I want to see something different, but I also want people to tell their own stories. There's nothing worse than someone else telling someone else's story. Why is Elizabeth Taylor telling Cleopatra's story? You're not Cleopatra. Why are we not representing our people, our culture? And everyone should have the right to do that. Everyone should have the right to tell their country stories, their ethnic stories, the culture, just even if it's just a folklore that they made up along the way. They should be entitled, empowered, and entrusted to tell their own stories. And that is how you build community. Making the same game. I hate bro games. Like, the bro era is done. The bro era it's done. It is done. Like, there has to be something new. There has to be something different, because everyone is tired of it. Everybody's tired of it. And you're going to have to, it's kind of like buying stocks and bonds. You're going to have to diversify your funds if you want to stay relevant in this game, because people are tired of the same. I digress.
I would like
Thank
to
you
add some.
so much. Kaden, go ahead.
Obviously, I agree with everything that has been said so far. You can't be what you can't see. And I think it can also work, maybe not the other way around, but I like to think that the majority can profit from this as well, by no longer seeing certain people as this very stereotypical way they always see people represented. Like, as a transmasculine Asian person, there's not much representation for Asian men in like romantic lead roles. Um, so you kind of grow up with the idea that Asian men might not be attractive. And if there are more movies, and like with the recent Marvel movie Shang-Chi, for example, it shows that Asian men can be attractive, that they can be the superheroes as well. Um, and I just hope that representation can also create more empathy, can make people realize that maybe they are not that different from other people, even if they do not share the same identity. Um, I'm thinking about like the movie Parasite, which was very much a Korean movie, but then it got worldwide praise, and there were people from other countries who could really kind of empathize, and they could recognize themselves in these Korean people, even though they may not share the same ethnicity. And I think that's very important to to remember as well, that you don't have to share the identity with somebody to kind of to understand them in a way, to maybe even feel similar or have similar struggles in your life.
Thanks so much. Yes, go right ahead, Madiba.
Yes, thanks a lot for everyone because I learned a lot from everything you say. Not new, but new perspective on something that I already had. Um, as an African, I have a I realize now that I'm talking with minorities out of Africa, some difference in our path that are interesting. For example, I didn't felt uh, not I will not say bad, but I didn't felt as a world to be a black person until I was an adult, starting to talk internationally. Because since I am born in a country where we are all black, so for me we was like, okay, even if I didn't saw us on TV, I had a lot of us out in the street. I had, and I was also lucky enough to be a little bit young, where we were in some kind of good moment in our history before a big crisis that hit my country, and where we only start to get bad picture of us. So we had some national heroes, and that's why it matters, because I was kid when I was part of the first African country who was in the quarter final of Soccer World Cup for the first time in history. It was a Cameroonian things, and we had these heroes, Roger Miller. Roger Miller was like, we were dancing his name. And I didn't realize until I grew up how it shaped me. Like, I'm Cameroonian, I'm proud of it. And because, like you said, there are great Cameroonian in the history, despite all the bad things of our country, there are some men. The one of the champion of UFC today is Cameroonian. So we have these little diamonds, and so that's where I would not have been where I am if it was not for this chain of inspiration. Because this is where I want to. It's important because at the end of the day, no matter what we do, gaming, movie, even being in finance, we are human beings building something greater than us. We will die one day. We will not be there anymore. I don't think people will maybe remember us in 2,000 years, even if we are billionaire. But something that will stay is really the fact that we will have been part of this chain of inspiration, chain of solidarity uh, that we have in our blood. And this is something I talk a lot about with my team in our universe, this legacy. In fact, the fact that it's really funny because I didn't think about that before the call on the fact the the main city of our universe is called Zama, and it's the place that symbolizes the place where humankind has achieved the ultimate bonding. Like, you are blue, you are yellow, there is the ultimate unconditional love between them. And we didn't want it, it's not something that was granted from the sky. They built it for centuries, and they have to protect it now with the violent outside world. And this is the legacy of a Korea then. So when I talk to you today, I just connect a lot of dots also on the importance of this, the fact that if humanity have to rise, have to evolve, in fact, because it's all about it, how we evolve as a race for the great purpose that is in our, we don't know why we are here, but it cannot just be random things. We have to make us go for this unconditional love of each other's, and the diversity of our media, diversity of the models, diversity of thinking in a constructive way is essential and important. Everything that we have done good has been always been done when we have done this move to the other one. And the funny thing is, while we have this beautiful meeting between us, there is also the meeting on the other side of the planet about let's kill them all, let's purify humanity. And I often find it funny on the fact that humans are so diverse.
A chain of inspiration. I really like the envisioning of it as a chain. Thanks so much. Nili, I come to you now. I'm thinking about this chain of inspiration and one person inspiring the next, and I wonder. So you are again. You're just about to finish your time in university here at DIE. And I want to hear more from you about your experience within education, studying 3D animation, also during your internship, how you've seen this experience comparing education within this field versus starting a career, and your experience thinking about that like chain of inspiration and whether that's been present for you or maybe not.
I'm not sure how you mean that I link the chain of inspiration with like my internship. For my studies, it's just simple. I had a lot of very strong women in my life that I admired a lot, and they were motivational for me to like just do what I love and not really care about whether it was a male-dominated field or not. But honestly, at DAE, I didn't really feel like I was part of a minority because I was surrounded by a group of friends who most of them were queer. So it was just a bubble of us. Um, the major I was studying of 3D animation has a pretty 50-50 balance between male and female presenting students. However, it really clicked more for me when I started my internship because on one of my very first days, well, first and foremost, on most days, there are 2 women in the office out of a team of like easily 10, 12 people. And the other woman is the only programmer. So that was a little bit of like, oh, okay, wow, that's different here. But also, something I distinctly remember is on one of my first days, someone complained about having had to model a gender neutral character. And that really like took me aback because the thing is, I know I'm very femme presenting. I still have my somewhat long hair now. I'm gonna cut it again because it's bothering me. But I know I present very femme, but I'm still genderqueer. So I was like, okay, you feel way too comfortable telling me this because you don't realize you're talking about me, actually. You don't realize you're talking about someone I would have related to. So you feel very comfortable just saying, oh yeah, designing a non-binary slash androgynous character was really annoying. So I feel like whilst in the studies, at least the studies I specifically did, because game development, for instance, there are way more male presenting students. But in my field of studies, it was fine. However, in the industry, I feel like there can still be a very big imbalance. But it probably depends a lot on the studio, on where the studio is, on what it works on how much efforts the studio makes for representation and diversity. But yeah, that was a shocker.
Wow. I can imagine. And I also wonder, Nili, how you, if you feel comfortable sharing, of course, how you handled that situation. Um, and if that were to happen again to someone out there, like completing their internship and something like that is said, maybe not with the intention to hurt someone, but still with that consequence, how would you suggest that people react or respond?
to be to be completely fair, I did not have the guts to tell him. I was concerned by it because he's a full-time employee. I'm just an intern. I didn't want to risk, and it was also the very beginning of my internship. I did not want to risk putting the entirety of the office, like for everyone to basically like turn on me for just saying, hey, you shouldn't complain about this. You can say that I was like, I should have been braver. Honestly, I could have.
No, I think should have is also, should is an ugly word. That's what I think. But no, Nilly, go right ahead. Go ahead.
But I talked about it with friends, and my best friend in particular, and they basically told me, listen, if you feel unsafe, talk about it with your coach, talk about it to your supervisor alone, and see if you can figure something out. It's never gotten to the point where I felt unsafe, but I felt like slightly unwelcome because of that comment.
I'm so sorry to hear that happened, but thank you for eloquently explaining it, and also opening up to us and people out there on Twitch as well. And I think that unfortunately is something that happens all too often, and that's also why it is so important to open up a space to talk about these things now. Honestly, Aisha, I saw your hand go up, and then Rila or Kaden as well, but we'll go over to Aisha first.
If I can offer anything, a word that I would love for you to remove from your vocabulary is just. You're not just. When you say I am just, you minimize. And when you minimize, you shrink. And when you shrink, you get smaller. When you get smaller, you stay silent. That one word told you how you felt about I'm just an intern. Interns become employees. Employees perpetuate stereotypes. Interns can, like, you got a microphone, you have a voice. And it's not like you never have to make a big production. It's really as simple. That's inappropriate. And it's out there. And you let someone else self-reflect. But I never want you to think that you are just, because you show up much more than a just. That's such a minimizing word for our community, especially when we show up presenting how we do. And people never know what to peg me for. Like yesterday, I got, why are you in the women's room? I was like, I don't know, because I'm a girl. So, but it's a reality that I deal with every single day. I get served to death, and I'm like, okay, I got she, her pronouns, Shawty. This is me biologically, hey, or however you deem me, but a haircut does not define you, nor does a student status, nor does an employment status, full-time, part-time, contractor. Take the word just out. I am this. That's inappropriate. And good day. Bye, Rila.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, Rila, I think you're muted.
Oops.
There
All
you
right.
go.
All right, here I am. Lily, I don't think you need to feel bad at all please don't say you don't have the guts. There's so many power structures working against you in that moment. Like, I think as I get older, I'm so much more comfortable with just telling people when I think they're out of line or if they've done something inappropriate. And that's part of being older, but also because I don't need them to be my friend in that moment. But, there's so many things working against you in that moment that the way that you reacted, that's what you were able to do. But, if in that moment you can't bring yourself to say that's inappropriate, then just start practicing little ways of just saying something that would signal to the other person that they've messed up. So if in that moment you had said, I'm genderqueer, by the way, it's less confrontational, but it would have had the same kind of ooh, and then the other person would have had to sit with that, and then it would have been their responsibility to work out what to say next. So yeah, practice, come at it slowly, and before you know it, you'll have your way of telling people, when they're out of line or when they're inappropriate.
Thank you so much. Vadipa, I see you had your hand up as well.
Um, yeah, first, like everyone says, sorry that you had to feel that. It's really weird for me because often in the cliche, we know that Black people are supposed to understand it. But like I said, as a Cameroonian growing up in Cameroon, I didn't really felt that kind of pressure of being a minority at this level in my intimacy, for example. But I know that, for example, the homosexual community in Cameroon suffer a lot, for example, and I have some friends that have to hide this. So I cannot relate because I'm not in that case, but I can have a little view of that. Um, and also, I was meditating on the level of bias that, as a human being, I have in my patriarchal education. Uh, it's something that I discuss a lot about with my wife. The it's often about, when a woman is, for example, speaking and sharing about the pressure of the patriarchy on her. Somehow, we men, straight men, by the way, we often have but we have done this good, we have done this good, that is urging in us. And it's really interesting as self education moment for me to see that the bias that she's talking me about can stay. Even in this kind of discussion, I can see my patriarchal bias often point out, we can do this, we can do this. And I say, okay, this is what she's talking about. In fact, like I'm really biased on the way to see things. So yeah, I everything to say that sorry for you and courage.
And courage, and you'll grow that muscle. And time and time again, um, yeah, we practice and we grow those muscles. It's not easy at all, but it's something that also that comes over time, and we become stronger, all the more stronger because of that. Um, I want to jump over to another question, about any. So we've been talking about some, of course, also solutions, but problems and things that are going, maybe not so great in the industry. But I also want to highlight some use cases, some games or films or media that you think are really prime examples of representation. I know that's a loaded word in itself, and doing an excellent job, basically, of highlighting and embracing diversity. So any projects you would like to highlight, anything that the viewers out there can take look up by themselves afterwards, as yeah, basically a use study. Aisha, I see your hand went right up. Go right ahead.
So I have one, and I'm actually ashamed to say this because last year I didn't, and I work here. I work at Xbox, and I didn't find out about this game until last year at Pride. I hosted Pride last year, and someone brought the game up. Tell me why. And I was like, how have I never seen this game? Mind you, I be in my own bubble sometimes. But I brought up the game of Tell Me Why, and I played through it. And if you don't know the premise of the game, it is two identical twins. One is transgender. And what I tell people, and this is how I mentor a lot of young LGBTQI plus youth. And one of the things that I have them do when they play this game is I'm like, don't focus on the gender, the transgendering, or any of this. This is a game about decisions and having conversations with those decisions. Listening to Rila and it's Nelly. The one thing that I'm aligned with Rila on is like the older I get, I don't care. I don't want to be your friend. Like my no is a no. It's a complete sentence. Do whatever with this information you choose to. And I keep going. But I look at the younger generation, and this is why I try to empower my daughter to use her voice as much as possible, even if it's in opposition of myself. Like, you have to tell me when I'm wrong, because one, I can do two things. I can acknowledge and affirm how you feel, or I can give you different insight, but I'm always going to respect what you say. And just teaching her to have people respect what you say and what you feel is more important to me than being right. But I go back to this game because you have identical twins, which you would naturally assume are the same because same egg split. One's on a transitioning journey, has already transitioned, but both of them are making decisions. And when you really start to have conversations, and every decision you make, no matter what in life, it is true. Every decision you make will have an effect. And you can't go back and change it. You just have to go forward with whatever happened. And I think being able to have those types of conversations, specifically with the youth as they come up, is very, very important in just affirming their voice, affirming their choices, and just, hey, this is what you know. These are your options right now. You don't know what the other option would have given you. You don't know the other outcome, but this is what you chose. So here's your go forward. So I really, really like that game for that specific reason.
And one more time, the name of that game?
It's called Tell Me Why.
Tell Me Why. Okay. All right. Tell Me Why. All right. We'll provide also the links and information once this stream goes up on YouTube. We'll include all that information there as well. In case you all out there want to go take a look yourselves. Rila, go right ahead.
All right. So the project that I want to share is it grew out of a workshop series that I've been part of since 2017. So this is the Skins workshop series, and it's organized by the Initiative for Indigenous Futures, which is a research group that exists. It's based out of Concordia University. So the game that I mentioned was developed as part of this workshop series. It's called He Ao Ho, and it means a whole new world, maybe brand new world. Let me check. New world. Okay. So the thing that's special about this game is that it was entirely indigenously led. So we took in a group of about 20 indigenous Hawaiians. So we went to Hawaii to run this workshop. We taught them how to make a game, and we produced this game over 3 weeks. And we had cultural representatives and elders there who were just around the whole time and able to have conversations with all of the designers, the devs, the artists, particularly with regards to how to gently handle Hawaiian culture, mythology, heritage in a way that made sense when packaged in a game. Because I think, perhaps this isn't evident to everyone, but there's some knowledge that makes sense to put into a game, and then some cultural knowledge which actually isn't meant to be captured in media at all. So, and for a lot of people who turn up and said, hey, I have a particular identity, they don't necessarily know everything about that identity, right? So, I mean, this is part of the point I was trying to make about authenticity, is that there isn't one way to be. There isn't one sort of unique, oh, you are a perfect Hawaiian, or you perfectly know Hawaiian culture, go, you're allowed to tell Hawaiian stories now. That's not how it works. That's not how cultural knowledge works. This is all conversations. So, but bringing this back to the game He Ao Ho, it is a game about space travel, where the space traveler is an indigenous Hawaiian. And while that game was being made, we had so many conversations about space travel and colonization, because of course, Hawaii was colonized, and some people a lot of people will go further and say it's illegally occupied. Okay, it's currently, people will say legally, it is still illegally occupied by the United States. Part of what they were interested in doing in that game is representing a form of space travel that did not come from a place of colonization. So how can we explore these narratives while not retreading trauma? And that was a really, really interesting experiment in trying to rethink game narrative, trying to rethink game mechanics, okay? Because it's not, oh, you turn up and you capture, it's yours. This whole planet is now yours. We had to really think about, okay, what would it mean to build mechanics around exchange, reciprocity, learning, and being respectful. So that's the game suggestion I have for you. He ao ho, spelled Heaohou.
Wow. That is incredibly fascinating. Again, all of these games, I'm going to link them when I upload this onto YouTube shortly thereafter. Thanks so much, Rila. Nila, Caden, Madiba, anything to add? Any interesting? Yes, go right ahead, Caden. Any interesting use cases?
Yeah, for my previous master, I actually did a case study on an indie game called Hardcoded. It is an adult game dating simulator, so it's 18 plus, and it's about trans people and androids in a dystopian cyberpunk city. It's a pixelated game, so it gives a bit of nostalgia for some people, perhaps. And my case study was on the representation of sexuality of trans people in video games. And while I was looking at the state of the art, I realized that there were not many video games with both trans people in them and having their sexuality represented, but hard-coded is basically all that in one package. Um, so you play as a trans woman android character who comes to this city where there is some kind of mysterious sexual disease going on that makes all characters in the city like kind of horny, and also it has a bit of a comedy story as well. And what surprised me was that there were a lot of trans and non-binary characters in the game, and it wasn't a big deal. Like, it didn't revolve about their trans identity at all, actually. They just could be the mechanist, they could be the person who works in the store. And even though their trans identity wasn't at front, it was obviously very explicit through the sex scenes in this video game, but it was very normalized, and that was really refreshing to me because most of the time trans bodies are very sexualized. Fetish, you almost only see us represented in the porn. Um, so this was a very refreshing game to see our sexuality at display in a non-fetishistic, voyeuristic way, actually. Um, so I thought that was a very great game to look at if you want to see more trans representation and representation on sexuality in a very casual, light-hearted way, actually.
Right, right. Thank you so much. And that was your thesis as well, Caden.
Yes, it was.
Okay, okay. Super interesting. Thanks so much. All right, Nili, Madiba, any suggestions? Anything you're playing, anything you're watching, or have played, or have seen that you'd like to highlight as something that stuck out to you? Go right ahead.
Yes, I will first talk about two mainstream games, but that influenced me. One influenced me a lot when I was young, and another one just hit me a lot on the writing. And the third is, of course, about what we are working on. So first is Metal Gear Solid 3, the character, the boss. It was the first time ever in my life that I saw a woman so powerful, and she was not a man in a dress. She was the incarnation of what of a type of feminine power uh, embodied in a video game character with the level of devotion, the level of it was something that hit me. I was 16 when I played that game, or even 14. But when I saw this woman story, I remember when I finished the game, and spoiler, she died. I was like this in front of my TV, like true heroes. And not only because I've already have good hero, male hero, but this was the first woman writing that hit me And when I started to write my game, I was like, I want to write a woman like this. And I think I succeeded a little bit on some of our character, a little bit. And Tales of Arise is one of I'm a huge fan of the Tales of series because they have huge writing about the difference, the management of difference, the management of racism, and Tales of Arise pushed the boundaries of the writing a little bit further. It was one of the best realistic group dynamic that I have seen in a RPG in the last decades because you really have this. I had the feeling that I was watching a hard discussion between a Cameroonian and a French because they have colonized us, and we have sometimes really weird discussion about. And I think Black American and White American often have also the same discussion at some point, like, as this, you have done this, yeah, but get over it. We can't because it's still there. And this was one of the games that showed how it's hard to build together with the past between two races. Not only two, by the way, it was more race than two, but two race mainly that has a huge dark path together. And it was really interesting how they wrote it on the blindness of the colonizer because he's like, oh, get over it. It was not so bad. And the anger of the colonizer, because at some point, if you stay only on the anger side, you cannot be constructive too. And everyone still clash until they find a way to get in the middle. And this was really interesting for me as a game showing diversity. Because something also that I wanted to say is, and maybe it resonates with what Rila said about there is no uniform authenticity. I don't think there will be one day where we'll be joining together with the only um, happy face, every human being. Uh, because if we do that, I don't know. I think there will always be like a kind of friction. Um, as you said it about a doctor, like a good relationship is not about smiling 24 hours on 24. It's more about how we deal with the difference, how we make it constructive, how we make it something that we can bond. And this is something that I like a lot to see in video games when they see this dynamic. That's what I was searching, the dynamic of the difference. And to finish, the universe we are working on now for 20 years because we are keep working on it, writing about it. Orion, Orion is a work where you can see, of course, the visual part, the African fantasy, the universe, but we wanted to make it more deep than that. We wanted really to show in a fantasy world the current dilemma of a generation, our generation. We are in Africa, we are in this place where in the next 30 years, if my generation succeed, we can build one of the best places on earth to live, or we can build the hell on earth, literally, because we have so much thing against us, but we have to do it because of this chain of people who built our story to make it happen. And we start from so low and the stakes are so huge because if we have to build Africa and rebuild New York, we have failed. We have the duty to even show humanity another social role, another social model than just capitalism with black countries, African countries. I don't know because my English is maybe not good enough. So I just want to point out the challenge of invent a new word when you start as the last. You have to keep to first fill the late stage that you have done and invent something else for the other one. And that's something that we really try to show in our story about the symbolism that is behind with the universe that we are building. The African Challenge means to inspire the world challenge about where do we go from here, because humanity has to make a change. With the AI coming, with a lot of things coming, if we speed up our capacity to innovate and to kill others with the selfishness that we are building, we are dead. It's mathematical. We will be dead in 2000 years if we keep like that. So we literally have to change to something else that we really want to show in our universe at our little level. Not say just, but yeah.
Awesome. Ariane, thank you so much for sharing, Madiba. Nili, anything that you're playing or watching or would like to share?
I don't play that many games, to be honest. I'm more of a movie buff, to be honest. But a TV show I watched that blew up kind of when it came out was Our Flag Means Death. And it was just really, really nice to have Vico Ortiz play Jim, who's a canonically non-binary character, played by Vico Ortiz, who is a non-binary actor. And it was actually their idea to make the character non-binary as well. And it was just really nice to have this representation of like, okay, they briefly talk about it in one episode when it's revealed that they're non-binary, basically. And the crew is like, okay, so are you still Jim? And the answer is yes. I'm just still Jim. Treat me as you did before knowing this. I'm the same person, except I talk, because they were pretending to be a mute. And that's it. And they have a really sweet relationship, and it's just really nice to see normalized, basically.
I think that also reflects a bit of what Caden said as well regarding the normalization of an identity of human beings, and not this person doing anything like extremely ridiculously spectacular by any means, but just existing and that being valid and normalized. So it's really great that you shared Rila, go right ahead. It's really great that you share this.
I think one thing that's really interesting with both of the things Nili and Caden mentioned, and Madiba, your example as well, is like thinking about the communities for whom they're made. Because I think part of the normalizing is when you assume that the people who are watching it are also at a place that they can be like, oh, okay, this is normal. And part of that is just assuming that your audience shares enough common ground with you that they'll respond the same way. And like for me, that's when we know that we've hit a good place, where we don't need to be making media for the majority to understand, oh, this is my niche perspective, welcome, come in. It's like, no, we're making media for us, and this is how we want to make it, and this is how we're going to tell our story. So yeah, I think that's when we're doing things right.
And I think on that note, unfortunately, I look at the time and again, we absolutely fly by. Again, and I mentioned it earlier, we've never once gone through an entire list of questions, nor did we do it tonight. But you know what? That is okay. That is not the goal of Game for Thought. It is simply the goal to again gather here and have a really honest, open, transparent conversations with each other. So I have to thank you so much, Caden, Madiba, Nili, Rila, and Ayasia. Thank you so much for coming on here tonight, sharing your experiences, sharing examples of diversity and representation that really work for good and for change right now in the industry, but also beyond, because of course these are topics that affect the games industry, the digital entertainment industry, the film industry, but so far beyond that. At the end of the day, we are all human beings, and I think a lot of the things that we touched on tonight have to do with being human. And I really like the concept that Madiba brings of that chain of inspiration. So maybe we can think about how we can be that chain inspiration, or add a link to that chain of inspiration as we go further. So thank you again. If we can have some appreciation, some love in the chat for our panelists this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, Kaden, Madiba, Nili, Rila, and Ayesha. And if you're out there watching on Twitch, hang on for just one more minute or so. I have some closing words that you won't want to miss, so hang on for just a minute, and we'll see you soon. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you a million plus one times for joining tonight and for joining throughout the other live streams that we've had during this third season. I cannot believe this is the end of the third season of Game for Thought. Thank you for sticking around with us, and thank you for participating in these discussions. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for suggesting topics, and sharing on social media as well. Really so much appreciated. A special thanks tonight to Bradley, our moderator and also overall tech helper for the evening, and Casper, our tech expert for the entire season so far, almost. We couldn't have done it without you, so thank you so much. Huge thanks, and if we could get some love and support in the chat for our amazing panel tonight. Rila, Kaden, Ayesha, Madiba, and Nila. We couldn't have done this without you, and your insights were really invaluable, so thank you for sharing them with us. And we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you in the future. We can't wait. This was the final live stream of the 2022-2023 season. Of course, we can't wait to see you next fall. We will have, again, the third Wednesday of the months, we'll come to you with a different ethically relevant topic in the industry, and we'll have a new season, new topics. Soon I will be asking for feedback regarding the Game for Thought series so far. I'll be asking for new topics. Of course, we have a whole new year to cover ground for, which is very, very exciting. And I'd like to specially thank HOEST and Digital Arts and Entertainment and the Flemish Audiovisual Fund, who supports us throughout all of our endeavors. Thank you. Really, we are indebted to you, and we're so grateful to be able to continue these honest and transparent conversations through Twitch, involving both our students and beyond. So really grateful for that. Something new, very exciting. So we just launched Game for Thought blogs. So the idea is after each stream, we'll have a blog post, which basically brings the topics of the stream and the message through a different medium. So we'll have a written version, basically, of Game for Thought through blog posts that will be on the websites of the Flemish Games Association, so FLAGA. We will be sure to link the website and the first blog post of Game for Thought in the description box once this is over on YouTube. So be sure to go ahead and check it out. So Game for Thought blog posts. Looking forward to bringing this content to you through a different written and very exciting medium. With that, I thank you one more time for joining, and I ask for all of us to keep these topics in mind and to be cognizant of how ethics in digital entertainment, in games, in film, and also in our daily lives continues to be relevant. Think about these topics, think about future topics that we should cover on the stream. And with that, wherever you are, thank you so much for joining, and we cannot wait to have you back next season. From HOS Digital Arts and Entertainment, this is the finale of Season 3 of Game for Thought, and we'll see you next year. Bye-bye, everyone!